Today we're working on a 2007 Toyota Camry. In a previous video we diagnosed this to have a vacuum leak coming from the intake manifold. This is going to be the repair, how to replace intake manifold. In order to replace the gasket, maybe you don't need the manifold, but you need to replace the manifold gasket. This video will also be helpful because you have to get the manifold out to replace the gasket. So the first few things to take off is the engine cover. You got two 10mm bolts, and then we'll come down to the resonator. You got two 10mm bolts here, and then that slides out. Air filter, two 10mm bolts, one here, 10 mil for the clamp. Disconnect the mass airflow, and that comes out. So we'll do that to get some room. Now that those things are out of the way, you can leave the air filter box there. So the next is to get this out of the way. You have a clamp here on this hose, the evap purge connector hose, and then down on the throttle body you have this clamp here. Now to get that clamp, really any of the clamps, let me get my, sorry about all the wiggly. I like using a pair of bent needle nose pliers. Do a really good job getting these types of clamps off, especially that one down there on the throttle body. Really helps. So anyway, just a tip. Okay, next is you can leave the throttle body on at the moment, but you have the throttle body connector, little hose here that clips into there. You just pull it out, and then you'll have two coolant lines, one here and then this one right here that'll come out, so you can get a drip pan underneath the car because you'll definitely be losing some coolant. So that'll be this side, and then on this side you have right here, this 10mm, this goes to your brake booster, so that'll be undone on the side. But you have this 10 mil, and then the PCV hose right here comes off next. For those coolant lines in the back on the throttle body, another idea is to have something like this, or one of these, to clamp off the hose, so then you get minimal spillage. So draining the coolant or losing a lot of coolant can be avoided by having these clamps. Okay, now that those hoses are all off, connectors off, with those line locks, I can't see right here, but when you put those line locks on, those coolant hoses, I only had a couple drips come out, so that's not even a big issue. I was worried more would come out, but so I think that's the ticket. So next we're gonna come and take the fuel rail off. You don't have to disconnect any of these connectors, just unbolt. The fuel rail is two, right there, two, I think that's 12mm bolts, and then you just wiggle the fuel rail off and you can pull it aside, so you don't have to disconnect any fuel lines or anything like that. So that'll be the next move. Two 12mm bolts, and then wiggle it up. So now that the fuel rail's out of the way, you get access to, you have two nuts, one here, 12mm, and then you have three bolts up top. You can't see, but under the VVT solenoid is a bolt, and then in the middle is a bolt here, and then on this side there's a bolt here. So 5 altogether, 2 nuts, 3 bolts, that's on the top. And then you'll have 2 bolts that you have to get from underneath. So now that you're under the car, you have 2 bolts, 12mm here, and then one over here. And then, let's see, my light's in the way. But also from underneath, can't see it, but up and around on this side is the brake booster hose. You'll want to pull that while you're down here as well. So 2 bolts, brake booster hose, and then you can disconnect this connector for the oxygen sensor as well. And then there's a connector on right here as well. So connector for the oxygen sensor. Now that you have everything loose from up top, you could just pull the manifold back and out of the way. Now from this point, you don't have to pull anything else off. Right here is the gasket, so you could just pull the gasket off, put the new one on in place, and then slap everything back together. we're gonna replace this whole manifold. So I'm gonna continue with the video, but if all you're doing is the gasket, this is as far as you have to pull off. And then take the gasket out. It's just a little rubber gasket in there. Put the new one in. It's a little channel. It goes in pretty well. Slap it all back together. If you're replacing the manifold, then stay tuned. We'll keep filming and showing you how to get the manifold off. On this brake booster, you follow, it turns into a metal line. You have a 10 millimeter here, and then over here another 10 millimeter, because you want this to be able to move out of the way. After you have that removed, we have to remove this as well, because there's not enough space in between here to pull it out. So the manual says remove the windshield wipers, then this plastic cowl piece, and then you'll have access to more bolts underneath. Now the plastic piece has just little clips on either side, and I think it's supposed to just snap in. So once those two clips on both sides are taken care of, snap it out. I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. So after you have the plastic piece off, you have to remove the wiper motor. It's 10 mil bolts, one here, and then two on the side, and then the connector, and then it pops right off. Not hard to get. So now that that's off, you'll see to get this metal piece off, you have 10 millimeter bolts on the back, one there, just along the back, and then on either side you'll have these bolts here. There's just two bolts holding that on, and then this whole, oh, and then don't forget your wiring harness. Then this whole thing comes off. These are part of your struts. I have the car on the ground, but if you have it jacked up, just be aware of that your struts will be suspended by one bolt. But with the car on the ground, you know, the weight of the vehicle, you know, these just come right off. So now that that is out of the way, you have plenty of room to pull your intake manifold straight up and out. And it may seem like a lot has to come off, and it is, you know, a number of pieces, but all in all, it's been probably only about an hour. It might sound like a lot, but really it's not that much. So you can look at the intake manifold, and I don't know if you could tell in the camera, but you can see how the plastic has been melted, warped. That was our intake leak. So with your new manifold, the old one, you have to take this shield off and put it on your new one. Other than that, it's just the throttle body goes on. It comes with a new gasket. I believe that's it. And then your PCV hose gets transferred over. Everything else, I think that's it. So let's get those transferred over, and then we can start slapping it back together. So before I put the cowl back on, just some things to remember not to forget is hooking your brake booster hose back up. That can be an easy one to forget. Your coolant line hoses, those can be something accidentally missed. Your evap there, and then just a tip too, when you put the 5 bolts up top in for your intake manifold, leave them loose. You know, you can snug them, but leave them loose so you can wiggle just a little to get those 2 under that you get from underneath, because if everything's tight, the holes might not exactly line up, so then you'll be struggling. But if you leave this loose, that gives you some wiggle room to get those under bolts. I believe that's it. Just make sure, you know, you plug everything in, tighten. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the cowl back together because everything else is in and tight. All right, now the plastic cowl piece is on. When you put your wipers on, there is a left and a right. The one that goes, at least looking at the car, the left, or the passenger, it has a unique bend in it. And then the other one is pretty straight. And you can't really get them mixed up anyway. But there you go. Tighten these up, and we are, I believe, ready for a test drive.